morning. Jai Hind. It's a special honor today to be here with Voice and Data and to be able to put across in the connectivity world this very nascent organization or the something which is coming now, and that is space. And I will take this opportunity also to tell you about what is happening overall in space in the world and specifically in India. But to start with, I would talk to you about my older profession, and that was in the army. I was fortunate enough to serve for 40 years with the Gurkhas. And as General Manik Shah has said, they are the most courageous and brave soldiers. There's a story about it, a joke, that when World War II was ending and India also got their independence, Indian Army decided that we should also have special forces paratroopers. And paratroopers are people who jump behind enemy lines with parachutes to surprise the enemy and take the enemy from behind. They are our elite forces. So we were looking for troops for that, and this colonel from special forces was going to all other battalions to take volunteers. So he asked one of the CEOs of an Gurkha unit that will I get volunteers from your unit? And of course, he says, well, my men 100% will be volunteers. You come in and talk to them. This colonel came there, had a chat with them, and he described what are you supposed to do in war. You sit in an aircraft, you go behind enemy lines, you jump, then you hit the enemy from behind. So how many of you are volunteers? And out of 100, there were only 50% volunteers. That came as a shock to the commanding officer and to this gentleman also. Oh, well, they said 50 is quite good enough. While they were having tea outside, the commanding officer asked them, my God, Gurkhas, and only 50% want to jump from with a parachute. They said, oh, there's a parachute also. So they were ready to jump without parachutes. And that is how Gurkhas have been. I have also jumped into this world of technology without a parachute. And now I would take you to this very interesting world in which India is there as a lead player. And that is space. I would start with man's forays into space started just when 1945, just before the World War II was getting over. And mind you, it was the Germans who found rocket technology first. They were the ones to first send a ballistic missile, V2 missiles they were called, Vengeance 2, which were created by a German scientist called von Braun. And had this been discovered earlier by Hitler, maybe World War II would have gone differently. But well, before the war was over, America planned Operation Paperclip. And Operation Paperclip was picking up the best scientists from Germany and taking them to America for research, basically on the nuclear domain and in space. And hence, this gentleman, von Braun, along with 150 scientists, was taken to America. And that was the spinal column or the fundamentals on which later Apollo was launched. In fact, when Apollo was launched, when the landing on the moon took place, this gentleman, von Braun, was given the Medal of Honor in USA. The Russians also did not stay behind. The Americans took 150 scientists. They took his friend who was there, another scientist, brought up with 500 scientists. And mind you, 500 worked better than 150 because the first satellite, the first human being on space was by USSR and not America. Well, this competition between them carried on and slowed down mostly after the moon landing had taken place. Thereafter, the first time space was used by human beings there was an attempt primarily to use it for communication. Now I'll take you fast forward and I'll take you to very recent times where America has been fortunate to have people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who have dreamt about taking human beings to the moon and Mars. They believe human beings cannot be limited to just the Earth, but have to live far beyond in space, in moon and in Mars. And that is how what they have done is they have not only imagined it, they have introduced disruptive technology into it. And what has happened is in the last, firstly, is like the cost for sending anything in space is the cost of a rocket. And a reusable rocket has been made not by NASA of America, but by Elon Musk, a private player. Similarly, today, satellites which were half the size of this room now are as big as a small table or even smaller. So, all what has happened in technology has happened in space. In 2020, there was a conference which the American Space Force, which went much before the Space Force was formed, it was called Space Command. They called all the thinkers, scientists, experts in different domains to have a horizon 40 years beyond, that is 2060. And they worked out what will happen in space in 2060, commercially, technologically, what are good things, how are things going to happen. And ultimately, after their discussions for 3 to 4 days, they came out with 7 to 8 contingencies. Best case, worst case, what will happen. Now, I'm just going to tell you the best case. What happens in 2060? What they imagine is there will be human beings living on the moon and on Mars. There would be many like international space stations all over the cislunar space, and human beings would be working there for manufacturing. Then it is imagined that most of energy which is produced on Earth, fossil fuel burning, that most likely will stop, and solar power will be beamed down to the Earth to protect our planet as a green planet. And also, mining itself will stop because it will be asteroids and others which will be utilized for that. Now, if that is the world, of course, it requires a lot of disruptive technologies. It requires a lot of more development in science. But every day, the way things are happening, it is quite likely to happen. India also has to be there. So communication has not only to be terrestrial, but it has to be in space. Not only for people on Earth, but all human beings which will be there all over in the space. Now, if that is to happen, and maybe our government also saw some of it coming, and in 2020, space, which till then had only been the domain of the Indian government, and that is ISRO, was opened up to private players. And that is the time my organization came into being, and InSpace was made, which is basically an organization to promote, authorize, and regulate space. All these things happened between 2020 and 2022. And the best part is in 2023 and even in the end of 2022, there have been startups and private players in India who have proved their scientific ability. We have a company called Skyroot in India, which was able to launch a rocket in October of 2022. Today, from here, I'm going down to Sriharikota, and the next startup, which was incubated in IIT Chennai, is going to have their suborbital launch of a rocket, Agnikul. And what is special about this launch by this startup is that the complete engine has been manufactured by 3D printing. It is a complete engine. And I'm praying that, and we should all pray that tomorrow morning, when it happens, it is successful. With this happening, the government, when 2.5 years back, I made this association and I met all who were there in space. Fortunately, because for 60 years, ISRO has been there, there is an ecosystem in India. There were suppliers, There were people who were producing products for ISRO who have abilities in components, subsystems of satellites. They start from Larsen and Toubro to Walchand Industries to many of them, and many small MSMEs, 2,000 in total. Today, startups also, because now when I met, what I was trying to tell you was when initially when I met them, was asking them, what are your challenges? And they said, well, firstly, there is no regulation, there are no funds, there is no market, and we don't even know how to apply and other things. The government in the last 2 years has taken out a space policy which is very forward looking. It is when this policy was made from day one, there was an interaction with our association, one. And number two was when the policy has come out, it has given us more than what the private sector was expecting. Because it allows private players to do everything, make rockets, make satellites, and even carry out asteroid mining if they are capable of doing that, or land on the moon. Very recently, in April, the FDI policy has also come, and that is also a very liberal one, varying from 100% to 51% for private players for FDI's investment in India. With this, what has happened in the communication domain is what I will come to. There is a company, you would all know about it, Eutelsat OneWeb, which has a large ownership by Bharti Airtel. And that company has already launched 648 satellites in the low Earth orbit at about 1,200 kilometers and is already providing communication in some parts of the world. They have been given a license and sanctions in India. They're waiting for the final spectrum to be allocated to them, and this service would be available to every Indian very soon. Starlink also, which has 6,000 satellites providing low Earth communication, is also on the threshold of coming into India. They have applied for their license. Now, what will happen with satellite communication coming into it? Will it make terrestrial communication redundant? Not at all. At cost basis, it cannot compete with it. But what it does is, it connects those places where terrestrial communication cannot reach, where the cost of fiber, because of the challenges of geography, low population, where terrestrial communication cannot reach, satellite communication has reached there and will reach there. Also, it will be a co-traveler to provide more capacities, which day in and day out, the demand is increasing quite a bit. Very soon, we had done a study along with NASSCOM as well as Deloitte as to see what are the users for SAT services, and we came out with about 200 different used cases. And out of that, more than 60 to 80 use cases are in the domain of communication, where many are what 5G is doing. Maybe satellite communication will provide an additional support to this. I'll stop here, and I'm ready to take any questions if they are later. Thank you. Jai Hind.